Hi and welcome back to the shed. Now today there's a little bit of a change of pace because during the week I made a major mistake, one that I was very lucky to get away with. And what happened was, quite simply, I left my compressor on overnight. Now definitely not something you should be doing, because when I came in the morning I found the shed full of smoke. And the compressor was running full time and probably had been for hours. So when an electric motor starts putting out smoke, you know you're in a bad place. As it happened, shed safe, nothing burnt down, so all is good. But what I wanted to quickly do is to actually run through with you just general taking care of a compressor. Maybe some of you who have got some hints and tips that would be useful to me, because I'm certainly no expert on compressors. And this one is okay, but I bought it second hand. It didn't come with any instructions, so of course initially I didn't know how to look after it. I made mistakes, and I clearly made a very big one this week, one that I say could have been catastrophic. As it is, I think I've got away with it, but I am going to have to buy some new parts for it. Anyway, let's have a look at the compressor and run through exactly what happened. Right, so this is the offending article. It's a small compressor. It's 25 litre, as you might be able to read it on here. It's Sealy, so it's a decent make anyway, and it's got a 1.5 horsepower motor. What does that mean? Well, what this means is that this tank holds 25 litres of air, which is good for small tasks. So, I don't know, maybe if you were inflating your tyres or running an airbrush, this is the sort of size tank that you would need. This struggles with doing much more than that. I tend to use it for blowing things off and that sort of thing. But when I've come to use power tools with it, it really does struggle, because this runs, it pumps up to 8 bar, which is a decent pressure. It's not commercial pressure, but it's a decent pressure for your home garage. But of course, at the moment you start using air, then it bleeds out, and then the pressure drops, and then the pump has to run to refill it. And what I find with higher volume tools is that it just can't cope. It can't keep the tank pressurized for long enough for you to be able to use the tool effectively. You keep having to wait for it to refill. So it's good for what it does, but it has its limitations. And these really are quite simple. All you have is an electric motor. It's normally stuck on top. It has, I'll show you these in a little more detail in a minute. You've got an oil level somewhere on the motor. In this case it's on the back with an oil filler, because they're oil lubricated. And you've got an on-off switch here. You've got a dial here which shows you the pressure in the tank, and you may have another dial here which shows you the pressure that's coming out the hose. And the hose will clip onto a fitting here, and you've got an on-off switch here. Now, what happened with this one is that on the back side here there is a control switch which allows you to change the pressure that goes down the hose, because for some tools you might not want 8 bar coming out of down the hose. You might want a lower volume, so you can use this switch to change the volume that you've got coming out. And what happened was this switch gave way and it leaked air out, and because the air was leaking out, the motor was running to recharge the tank, but the air was going out so the air was constantly going down, and the motor was running continuously, which it's not really designed to do. So I need a new unit here. So this is actually I've replaced before, because the same thing happened. I bought a cheap one off eBay, but given that the original, which I guess was Sealy, was defective, well, I have to be fair. I'm assuming that was the previous one was the original Sealy one, and this tells me this was built in 2003. So the original one maybe could have lasted 14, 15 years. This lasted a year. So I'm going to be going back, I think, to Sealy to buy a new one of these. Now, I don't think it's done the compressor unit any good, to be honest with you, and I think it's probably a bit damaged, but it compresses, so for the time being I'll carry on using it for what I want. Now, as I say, it's good for small volume tasks because this is very quick to fill up. If you've got a bigger compressor, it takes longer to actually fill, and as you'll see, that's a bit of an issue, because at the end of the day, when you're finished working, you're supposed to leave these unpressurized, which means emptying the tank. So if you've got a big 100 litre, whatever, so 4 times the volume of this, you've just spent all that time and effort getting it compressed up. You go squirt with the air, and then you have to let it all out again. So a bit of a waste of time. So these units do have their use. So let me take you round it. Right, so the back of the engine, in this case, the motor, whatever you want to call it, you have a oil sight glass, so just like the one on your bike if you have them, and there's a red dot in the middle normally, and the oil should be above the red dot. Now this is almost above the red dot. When I looked at it this morning, it was way down here, and that's because it had burnt so much oil when it was running. So I put some more oil in, but I'm out of oil, so I can't fill it up properly. But that is something you should check regularly, daily, weekly, depending how often you use this, just like your bike engine really. So oil level needs to be there, and normally somewhere above the sight glass here there'll be an oil filler which may push in, screw in, depends what it is. This one screws in, so fill with oil, and you want compressor oil. I think these more or less run the same stuff, but you can get it from all your usual places like Machine Mart in the UK or similar places that sell these. They'll sell the oil. Some of these have a cleanable breather. This one sort of does. It's just a bit of foam. Some of them are, you can't really clean them. Now there's also an air filter, which in this case sits on the side of the engine. Now these filters will unscrew, so you can take them off, replace them, but again need to be cleaned on a regular basis. I need to buy a new filter. This one's looking a bit past it, so that's something else I'm going to buy when I buy some more oil. That should be cleaned, well, as I say, it really depends how often you use it. If you were using it every day, you might use clean that monthly. Now, on the bottom of the tank, and I'm just going to lift this up to show you, you wouldn't know. Right, so here, there's a thumb screw. And this one is currently under pressure. But as you can see, it's full of water, which is the reason I showed you under pressure. The idea is to take the thumb screw out and let it drain at the end of the day. So you've taken the pressure out, you undo this, you let it drain. Because what happens, this water rusts the inside of the cylinder. And eventually the cylinder will rust out and it will pinhole or otherwise potentially explode under pressure, which you don't want. So make sure that you drain this. Normally you just put something underneath it to catch the water, and let it drain out. To be honest, you don't normally get a lot out of this, but as you can see, it's that's pretty horrible in there. So, somewhere on there will be a pressure release valve. The idea of this is if the pressure ever goes over the maximum load for your compressor, this will open and let the excess pressure out, and you need to test it works just by pulling it. Didn't save my compressor, unfortunately, but it wasn't the problem. Now, to start the compressor, normally you just plug it in, make sure that the tap is turned off on here, and pull the switch up. It'll then pressurize, and when it gets to its full pressure, it'll stop running the motor, and then as you use the air, it'll refill it for you. So simple enough. But when you shut down, what you should do is turn it off and let all of the pressure out of the system. Now, if you've got your air hose connected, it's probably the easier and less messy way of doing it. So you connect your tool, for example, something like this, which is an air gun. Just use for blowing stuff off, and then you just hold the trigger down until it runs empty. And since I've got pressure in here, I'm going to release it just slowly. Oops, actually, or I would do if this pressure regulator was working. There we go. And we just leave that running until it drains, and we can see the gauge dropping down. Until it's empty. Alright, so there you have it. Don't damage your compressor by leaving it on overnight. Don't risk damage to the place you've got it stored in by the motor overheating and catching fire and burning everything down. I could have lost all my tools, all my bikes. That would have been a pretty major issue to deal with, to be honest with you, because it would also taken the shed out. Well, I don't even want to think about it. So just bear that in mind. Take that lesson from me. Turn your compressors off at the end of the day. Let the air out once a day, once a week, depending how often you're actually using it. Check the oil level, drain the tank of any water, and don't forget, clean your air filter on a regular basis. Really, it's just simple stuff. It's a motor. It's just like when you're using your bike. Anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys again soon.